But the way it gets framed is that, you know, Hillary is the feminist, and people forget how much part of the status quo Hillary is, and how you know. So do we take the position as feminists then that a woman who defended the status quo and its interests is better than a black man who not only opposed those interests in the Democratic Party, opposed the war, but throughout the campaign has, you know, I don't think Obama has been associated with any kind of sexist behavior. Hillary Clinton clearly came out with racist comments, you know, when she was asked whether Obama was a Muslim. She says, well, no, as far as I know, right? There are a number of times and then saying that white voters would not vote for Obama because of his race. So clearly, Hillary Clinton played both the gender card and the racism card, right? And Obama, actually, if we look at, and it's a really good example of anti-racist politics, because if Obama had made race an issue from the beginning of his campaign, I don't think he would have survived the campaign. You know, he had to put a lid on discussing race, whereas gender could be talked about quite freely. And, you know, so it's really interesting to see how race and gender politics have played out. But it's not just the man or the woman or the black man or the white woman. It's actually what politics they actually bring to the table. And there, I think, it's very clear that Obama's politics, at least in terms of what we've been able to see, and God knows how much he's going to deliver, have on the face of it been much more progressive than what Hillary has been bringing to the table. So I think this kind of discussion is really needed around race trumping gender or gender trumping race, and looking at what happens to the intersection of race and gender, like in the figure of Michelle Obama. You know, nobody kind of talks about her as a feminist and as, you know, bringing a kind of feminist politics into the administration, which Hillary did. Know the kind of approach that I see from Biden, and this mainstream approach between violence against women as a kind of domestic issue, as an issue in the US, can be very easily separated for them from the kind of state-sponsored violence that we're seeing in the war. I think they can make that separation very easily. And Biden is obviously completely, seems to be committed to the idea of national security. And the demonizing of Muslim communities, again, they can separate the violence in their own communities from the violence that exists in other parts of the world. And I think one way in which this becomes possible, and I'm not saying that Biden thinks that, but one way in which I've seen this politics play out in Canada, and I think in the US as well, is that when violence against women occurs in mainstream society, it's the individual man that gets blamed, he gets pathologized, right? And we saw that with the Picton case, for example. You know, the whole discussion on Picton's mental stability, has he got a mental deficiency of some kind? Did he understand what he was doing? The pathologizing of that. You know, when Mark Lepine, when the Montreal massacre happened, the focus on, had his girlfriend just dumped him? Did she have an abortion without telling him? These are the kinds of, you know, explanations that are brought to the surface. But when we have violence against women in the immigrant community here, or in Muslim societies anywhere, the whole community gets pathologized, right? It's South Asian culture that's patriarchal. It's Islam that's patriarchal and violent. And so a whole community becomes pathologized. And I think that helps to keep this separation. That the violence is not seen as a question of male power over women, whatever levels at which this male power is expressed, whether it's within the family, whether it's, you know, at a systemic structural level, or at the state level. And I think it's a very racialized construct of violence against women. It can be neatly separated like this. So, for example, Picton can be seen as an individual case, but when violence happens in the South Asian community, or the whole community is made responsible for it. And often as feminists, we respond in a way that feeds that discourse. So, you know, in the South Asian community, anytime a woman gets murdered here, many feminists come together, we organize public forums in the community, we want to talk about this, we want to discuss it. Picton murders so many Aboriginal women. You don't see any white women's groups coming forward, organizing a community forum to speak to other white people in their community about why do white men murder Aboriginal women, even though there's a whole history of that, right? So it's the way we understand violence against women, and sometimes the way that feminists also reproduce that discourse that then allows for this, separation of violence as a kind of domestic issue, and so Biden can be progressive on that issue and yet not recognize the level of violence that is being done to women in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think we really need to re-theorize the whole question of violence against women, not keep the sole focus at the domestic level, and look at it internationally. Of course, feminists have tried to do that. Angela Davis, for example, she wrote the book Woman, Race and Class, and she was trying to make that direct connection, saying when the soldiers were in Vietnam, fighting the Vietnam War, so many Vietnamese women were raped, murdered, and she asked the question, what do you think these men will do when they come back home? So, we need to make a connection between the kind of interpersonal level of violence, state violence, and really theorize violence against women in a way that speaks to all of these complexities. Biden doesn't, I don't think. Yeah.